right, welcome to the Call to Freedom. It's Tuesday, April the 23rd, I think, 2019. And I'm your host, as always, Aria, joined in the studio today by
Chris
and Michael.
And there's a lot of interesting news. Well, there's really not a lot. There's some interesting news. Most of it we can, discuss the various aspects of pretty extensively, like the opioid crisis and a pharmaceutical company now facing federal charges.
Interesting.
In relation to it. Yeah, for the first time, actually.
I'm shocked that's actually happening because they write the laws, basically.
Yeah.
And they enforce the rules.
I mean, they absolutely have members on the FDA board.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
basically
surprising.
Their entire membership comes from the industry, from what I understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's a remnant of World War I collectivism, really, where we established these sorts of boards to help the war effort, and it systematically expanded since to include things that weren't in any way really related to war, where, okay, well, we've got this one for vehicle production, we've got this board that handles this, and it's made up of industry experts who just happen to be the CEOs of this company that they're supposed to be regulating in the first place. So then it expanded to include food and drugs and all of that, stuff that we need.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad idea to evaluate drugs and stuff before they come onto the market, but the problem is that we end up with a situation where it's the drug companies doing the evaluations anyway, so it's not really like there's a separate entity doing that. It's just them following certain protocols, which could be done with or without the government involvement.
Absolutely. Right. And probably more effectively without government involvement. The best example I can think of is the ESRB in video games, which is a completely voluntary panel made up by video game developers and publishers who get together to decide what the rating on a game should be.
Yeah, that's true. Now, that was done in response to, if I'm not mistaken, threats of censorship and so on.
Yeah, following games like Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 1, I think, was the one that caused the controversy, and Night Trap.
Even predating that, going back to the beginnings of television and the movie industry and stuff, there were calls to censor it, if I recall correctly. And I think there was even a censorship board in the United States at one time, wasn't there?
I have no idea.
Sounds familiar, but I don't remember exactly what it was called.
The people who rate movies now, they're actually part of the state, though, aren't they? It's not voluntary any longer?
I don't know. I think it's a separate private board that does it, private organization that does the ratings.
Oh, for the movies as well?
Yeah, I believe so. It was whatever, government facility that did that long ago as far as I know, doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. Well, that's good, at least. I mean, the more government entities that we can do away with, in my opinion, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other news is that Trump may or may not be rolling back, quote-unquote, protections on trans people, which I find curious because
What does that mean?
I don't know. We'll have to get into the article to find out. But didn't it just happen where Medicaid came out as you can use it to pay for transsexualism now?
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like a good thing from the different types of protection laws that I can think of, like hate speech laws, things like that, or hate crime laws. They basically penalize somebody for communicating an opinion that is not nice while also committing a crime,
right?
Which to me just seems wrong, and that's I'm saying that as from a perspective of being targeted potentially by these people. So as a gay man.
It's curious that, we warned that these hate crime laws would ultimately be used to protect the state and its actors.
Oh, yeah. And we already have seen where the government, one of the protected groups is police officers now in some states. So they're actually using it. So when you say, I can't actually say the words, but, when you say that bad word to that police officer while you're committing a crime or whatever, or he's accusing you of committing a crime.
Pig?
The ones we can't say on the radio.
Yeah, the ones you can't, one of the FCC banned words. But anyway, the point is, when you say that word to the cop, you're basically, they consider that a hate crime now. And so you get
which is ridiculous.
Enhanced penalties. I believe it's enhanced penalties is the way that works. But yeah, I mean, it is utterly ridiculous. And this is the problem. And they're basically using it. It would be.
So sorry, I'm still back there trying to figure out what this slur is. Do people typically shout that at cops?
Apparently, they have definitely arrested. Yeah, I mean, people who are not necessarily right in the head. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're probably talking about a lower class of people that may not be quite thinking straight. But nonetheless, yeah, and they're using it also on activists and as well, like those types of charges. So it's a very dangerous. It's sort of like what's the catch-all one? Disorderly conduct. It's sort of got the same type of basis. It's not really a legitimate law, even though there might be there might be an argument for it. But the reality is very different. It doesn't get used in the way that it was argued originally. It's just abused.
Well, that's often the case. That's why I'm proud that there are no seatbelt laws here in New Hampshire. Because when they were first presented to Mississippi, it was like, this is not going to be an offense that you can be pulled over for.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we pull you over and we find you not wearing your seatbelt, we're going to tack on another charge. And, of course, it only took a few years before they were pulling people over for not wearing seatbelts.
Well, interesting, talking about like vehicle laws. Driver's licenses were actually originally introduced not for safety, but out of bigotry against motor vehicle operators. So
that sounds about right.
It was never for safety. And in the late 60s, there were still states that didn't have any kind of driving tests for getting your license. So it
was just a fee.
Right. The whole argument for, driver's licenses that people will give you is, well, it's for safety. No, it's not. There's nothing that prevents, not only does it not make us safer, but not only that, but it also doesn't stop somebody from driving without a license, nor does it stop somebody from, basically getting pulled over and arrested if they don't have a license, right, in the first place. And the people, and even if we start talking about like drunk driving laws, well, again, drunk drivers will, one, they're not thinking when they're doing it in the first place, but even after you suspend their license, they still drive drunk. And it often they get caught and they, their license gets suspended for a longer period of time and so forth. And you end up in this situation where even if you take away their cars, then you end up having them driving or riding a bicycle drunk and still causing a safety issue. So none of the things that we've done have really done anything other than it's mostly just security theater.
You're not addressing the underlying problem.
Right. You're not addressing the underlying problem. And it's a challenge. It can be potentially a challenge to address until somebody, admits that they have a problem. You're probably not going to be able to fix it. And really what you're doing is at most is getting essentially revenge. I'll put that in quotes a little bit, but revenge on a person that is got a health problem.
Well, that's what American criminal justice is about: punishment. It's not about rehabilitation or safety or any of these other things.
But that doesn't have any benefit to society. All it does is make people more miserable in society because everybody breaks the laws. There's not a single person who has not broken the laws because it's such a mess of laws that we've got. Just walking down the street is a breach of some law somewhere because you're not on a sidewalk or, you can't cross a street if you're under whatever conditions. Or
the crossing street laws here in Keene are really weird, aren't they? Like you're allowed to cross at an intersection even if there's no crosswalk, but only if there's a crosswalk at one of the intersections adjacent to you. Or something like that.
Well, I had a little bit of experience with this because I was arrested for crossing the street.
Right, that's where my
I can give a little bit of an explanation. So it's not illegal to cross a street. So it is illegal to cross the street if there is an adjacent intersection, which basically means
if there is one
with a traffic light. Yeah. So if there's basically no other cross streets, or intersections without a traffic light, then it's illegal. But if there's a cross street or intersection that doesn't have a traffic light, then you are not breaking the law when you cross the street.
So how close do you have to be to the intersection in order
basically, as long as you're not at the intersection with the traffic light, it's not against the law to cross the street, assuming you're not in between another traffic light, an intersection with a traffic light.
So I'm thinking about right up here where there are two intersections. Mm-hmm. Both of them have traffic lights, but they're very distant from each other.
That would not be against the law theoretically because adjacent also means it has to be near the other traffic light. And how close, I have no idea.
That's so bizarre.
This doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. I mean, if you shouldn't cross the street, you're going to eventually get run over, right? And as we like to say, that is a problem that will solve itself.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, this is the Call to Freedom. We're going to talk about more stupid laws, so don't go anywhere.
Oh, wow.
Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. And as always, you're invited to give us a call. That number is 603-283-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160. Or you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. And there's actually interesting news in regard to the opioid crisis, as they like to call it. And it's especially bad, this crisis, as they call it, here in New Hampshire, right? It was one of the things that did not help endear the people of New Hampshire to Ron Paul, if I'm remembering correctly, in 2012 or whenever it was.
So what happened exactly?
Yeah, what happened?
A lot of people here shoot up heroin.
Well, yeah,
we know that.
What does Ron Paul have to do with that?
Well, he is not a friend of the drug war, and for so many Republicans.
Interesting.
You know,
So you're saying
it's
some
a
of the people
police
here,
problem.
Some of the people here are supporting the drug war, basically.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And this would be my guess about why Ron Paul did not do particularly well in New Hampshire, because they even asked him in one of the debates, the heroin problem here is really bad. What would you plan to do about it? And he went on to say something like, well, we should legalize it. If heroin was legal, how many people here would just be like, oh, it's not legal, so I'm going to go shoot up some heroin?
So,
nobody.
I'm curious, like, what I don't see this heroin problem like on a day-to-day basis, and I go all over Keene. Where is this happening exactly?
Marlborough Street.
On Marlborough Street. Okay, so it's like one particular part of Keene that's got the problem.
Yeah, over there by the police department, generally.
Yeah.
That whole area over there and over here.
That's got a lot of student housing and low-income housing, from what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So
that seems to be where the heroin is concentrated. And I've never really extensively been down these streets or anything like that.
I have, actually, and I've never seen anybody shooting up heroin like on the street. But I certainly
tend to think they probably do that in their houses.
I would think so too.
Not on the street.
I've been down
so
Marlborough
too,
Street after dark, and I've seen things that made me think it was a little sketchy. So
yeah, I've definitely been down after dark, and I have also been during the day, and I've been in some of that low income housing. Actually, I haven't personally lived in the low income housing, but just visiting people. And certainly I know that there was even in that building, it was like a renovated house with a bunch of apartments. And even in that building, a lot of basically the tenants, every single tenant in that building is basically problematic from a law enforcement perspective.
Right.
Just because of different types of either behavioral issues or, drug use or whatever.
Well, the people with behavioral issues and mental issues, they're sort of corralled into these sorts of apartment buildings that are owned by this one particular guy who is running for mayor in the next Keene election. And he abuses their position as getting these welfare checks and things like that to basically extort as much money as possible from them before evicting them.
Yeah.
He's a tremendously immoral guy. And, of course, that doesn't help the opioid crisis at all.
No. Slumlord mayor? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not what we need.
It is not. So, just about anybody running against this guy probably stands a pretty good chance of winning.
You think? I mean, do you think the people who are shooting up heroin and stuff are going to come out and vote?
Yeah,
they could be.
Not. I mean,
they could be enticed to.
Not.
I mean, I think they could. It's not. It is asking a lot of them, considering that so many of them have that sort of mentality where they just don't care about politics, right? I think we could get those people to come out and vote if we present it as, look, just vote this one time. Just put in the effort this one time to vote for these libertarian candidates, and we will abolish the state, and you will never have to be bothered with voting again.
I'd put it this way. Your crappy landlord wants to be mayor. Do you really want to let him?
I don't know. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I kind of suspect it's going to be like trying to get the college students to come out and vote. It's just not going to happen.
But they did come out and vote in huge numbers.
In Keene?
Yes.
When? That's news to me.
And I think it was the 2018 election, wasn't it? Wasn't there they complained about it at the Republican Keene's meeting because there were so many new registers that day. And
I feel like I was there for that meeting, but I don't necessarily.
There was this company that was busing the kids.
They did. That's right. Yeah. They did complain about that. I don't know. So one of the things that I remember, libertarians doing in the past is promoting themselves on the college campus, and it just didn't work. Now, we still do it. They were more aggressive, from what I recall. There were I don't know who was it. The Democrats that were doing it, something like that, right? Yes. The Democrats apparently were very aggressive, going into dorm rooms and like knocking on doors and all sorts of stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. And I think that was the complaint that was occurring. So maybe it's just a matter of being more aggressive. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. And whether or not the college kids vote, you're certainly not breaking any sort of college policies or state laws by going to these slums and knocking on the apartment doors there, trying to get these people to come out and vote.
To bust them over or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was even transportation made available to students, right. when the libertarians did it and basically failed. Yeah. So I don't know what the trick is that the Democrats use to get them to come out and vote, but
ideology.
Maybe. Maybe it's a bunch of things working against us, but yeah.
So, in regard to the opioid crisis, which is a product of state intervention, I would suggest, people have been doing opiate for a really long time.
Yeah, that stuff's been around for millennia.
And I don't know how common it used to be for the average person to do it, but I do know that at least some people used to wear it in vials on their neck to just throughout the day randomly take a hit of the opiate and keep going.
Yeah.
And, of course, this was the 19th century, so things were different then. And, morphine was treated as a cure-all for coughing.
Wasn't it in like Coke and similar types of products?
I don't know if it was in Coke, but it was
Coke had cocaine.
Oh, okay.
It was in a lot of similar things.
Yeah. Well, but don't they still use it in hospitals and things, or not heroin specifically, but like it's
like
what is
morphine and things like that? Yeah.
Oh, morphine's heavily used.
Isn't that how most of the heroin addicts actually get addicted to it, from what I understand?
Yeah, opioid painkillers.
I think that's probably the gateway to it is the prescription. And they're like, hey, that feels pretty good, or the pain hasn't gone away yet, so I'm going to continue taking it.
Right.
And, I've been addicted to painkillers, and that was exactly how it started. I had a kidney stone.
Okay.
And even after the pain went away, because the kidney stone was no longer in my body, which, by the way, is the single most painful thing I've ever experienced. Not passing the kidney stone. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was it sitting in my kidneys. It was a perpetual and intense, dull pain around the clock. So bad that it made me vomit just from the pain alone.
Yikes.
It was really intense. Not something I would wish. It's the reason I no longer drink Coke and Pepsi and things like that.
Oh, what's so that causes kidney stones?
I don't know. I don't honestly know.
So why would you stop drinking if that's
because it was my primary drink at the time that I did develop kidney stones. So
yeah, I get it. The association, yeah.
So the water content at the least was not high enough to ward them away. And of course, these are my primary drinks now, and they have vitamin C in them, and the citric acid that helps to get rid of the calcium deposits.
Interesting.
So we're going to talk about the opioid crisis. So don't go anywhere. This is the Call to Freedom. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. And I want to tell you real quickly about the Rational Review. It is the Freedom Movement's daily news digest, aggregating stories from all over the internet that are of interest to libertarians and to liberty-minded people. They include podcasts, videos, blogs, and news articles, and are now a source for people to receive the Call to Freedom's podcasts. So be sure to check them out. Again, that's rationalreview.com to stay up to date on all the happenings in the wider world. Forgot to do that one yesterday. Sorry about that, Thomas, if you happen to listen to the show regularly enough. But the Rational Review includes like 10 podcasts a day. It seems pretty certain he's not listening to all of them.
Probably not everyone every day.
Because at least 2 of those are 3-hour shows, which only leaves 18 hours for the other 8 podcasts.
There's enough content just in podcasts there to keep you going all week long.
Yeah, around the clock. So we're going to be hitting our 100th episode on YouTube pretty soon. Looking forward to that.
Very nice.
We're also going to be hitting our 50th on Podbean. No, we hit our 50th on Podbean the other day. So that was cool, and something I totally ignored. We are finally on iTunes, by the way.
Interesting.
That was worked out.
Took long enough, but
it did.
That's
well,
Apple.
The big delay was just me not doing it. But I finally did it, and Apple was like, no, this looks like this is an amateur production. This looks like you're testing the podcasting experience. I was like, dude, there are like 50 episodes right there. What are you talking about? Email you when we've uploaded our first episode. All you have to do is click it. But it turned out to be some default text hidden in the iTunes specific settings page on Podbean. So,
which is ridiculous. Why are there iTunes specific settings?
I don't know, but there sure enough are.
So like you had clicked the box that said this is a test episode?
No. So basically when you're setting up the podcast to be broadcast also to Spotify and Google Play Music, as ours is, you give it a description, right?
Okay.
Or a summary and all of that. Usually each episode just pulls the default description, which is the summary of the episode that I put in there each day. But iTunes stuff is in a completely different section. So filling out the description here doesn't fill out the iTunes specific description.
Which is
so did you end up submitting it without any text for the iTunes stuff?
Yes, it had the default stuff, apparently.
Okay. Yeah.
Because even though the summary is always filled out, the iTunes summary has something like new weblog post in it or something stupid like that. So we fixed that and resubmitted, and they finally put it on their store, and it doesn't really appear to be taking off there in the way that I expected. You know, I know that about 50% of Free Talk Live's listeners come through the iTunes store.
Interesting. And now, is it just because you haven't given it enough time, or
it could be?
Maybe you need to promote it. You know, let users know that they can listen through their iTunes.
That's a good idea. Hey, you can listen to us through iTunes. If you're not listening to us through iTunes, you know, that's the issue that sort of exists with show promotion in the first place, is that we can't just promote it on the show, obviously.
You have to promote it elsewhere.
Yeah, and I do promote it on Free Talk Live and Aria Uncensored and things like that, but it's the entire reason I reactivated my Facebook account, was because that is where people go to find out what I'm up to. So I don't have a choice there. If I want to keep this audience engaged and share with them the things I'm doing, I have to be on Facebook.
Well, I mean, you can also get on other platforms as well. It's not,
and we are.
It's not like you have to do exclusively Facebook.
Right. Yeah. But you have to have the other people on those platforms if you're on other platforms.
Right.
If the people you want to reach are on Facebook.
But those people aren't going to be on other platforms if nobody's, on those platforms. So getting on those platforms is the first start to people moving away from, the platforms you may not like.
You have to be on that other platform. So...
Well, we are pretty good about joining these other platforms, of course. We are on Liberdon, and we're on Twitter.
Okay,
and all
so
of
that's
those.
Mastodon, right?
Right.
Okay.
But it's all automatic. Like, the Call to Freedom, it's interaction that seems to matter with people, right? That's why our Call to Freedom page just is going nowhere, because it's only auto posts.
Right.
It really gives the impression that no human being ever touches it, which is 100% true. I can't remember the last time I looked at anything. It was probably a year ago.
Yeah, I sure haven't.
That I manually uploaded a picture and captioned it.
Gotcha.
So it's just all automatic stuff. So no.
So stuff that's not. So I know some other people have like some sort of system where they post to one place, but it also gets automatically posted to other places.
We do that. I do that personally as well.
No, is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about that you don't respond to other people when they comment?
Well, they don't comment because the page itself it's not organic, I suppose.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's a human behind it. Therefore, that's the issue.
That's what I would, that's the sense that I get, yes.
Okay, so you probably need to add, when you post on Mastodon, maybe have that also go to Facebook. And that
it does.
Oh, it does.
Yes, but that's not really a human behind it.
Okay, and people can pick up on that, or
I don't know. That's a good question.
I'm trying to figure out like why it doesn't work if you're not actively on it, I guess.
You may have a point. I don't know.
It's probably Facebook, because I know the Call to Freedom's got a bunch of likes, but the posts don't get actually. I'll pull up stats.
No, it seems like they only got viewed about a month ago when I was still extensively using Facebook. Every time we would upload a podcast, I would share it to my wall, and of course, people would see that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the Call to Freedom posting the podcast links, which it does every single day within a few seconds of me uploading them, because I have it set up with Podbean. It automatically posts a description and all of that, and the title and a link to the podcast in question.
Maybe this is more Facebook manipulation. So people
it gets no views, no reactions, no anything.
Maybe it's not even showing up to users if it's just an automated system and you're never on it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's not. But the question would be, how do we make it show up to users?
You'd probably have to use Facebook.
I mean, I get a notification
and we're
every
back
day
to where we have to use Facebook.
The Call to Freedom has 1 new view or 2 new views like every day. It's just not getting shown to people.
I mean, that's not awful, considering we do absolutely no promotion of the Facebook page whatsoever.
Yeah,
I mean, I
haven't
haven't
bad at all to me, but I don't know.
I haven't even shared a post from it in probably months. I think yesterday I did share the podcast, and that was it.
Okay.
But I also noticed that my anarchist page, which I had back when I was doing anarchistgmail.com and stuff like that more regularly, is actually getting significantly more attention than Call to Freedom.
Interesting.
Because it does both. When we post a new episode, it automatically posts to both my anarchist page, because it's already there and it's already got people who like it, so why the hell not, right?
Right.
And that seems to appear in some people's news feeds, at least.
I see a problem. Looks like nothing's posted to Facebook since March 22nd.
That could be an issue.
So it's not even automatically posting it then?
Yeah. I will look into that in the break. Actually, let me quickly run a test, because it takes a second.
I've actually had this type of problem with auto posting. I forget where, but I think it had to be reconnected. One of the components had to be reconnected, and you might be having the same problems. I suspect you're using the same system I was.
So you said the last post was from March when?
March 22nd at 4:01 p.m.
Okay, that's definitely after this then. Okay, very weird. We're going to sort this out. I mean, it's easy we are the ones who are out there promoting the show, right? We're not big enough to have fans out there doing it each time an episode is uploaded or whatever. So, I mean, we're kind of the only people who can do that, and I'll be honest, I have not really been doing it. So the growth that we've had is impressive.
And entirely organic, and most of it's coming from what? DLive, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify.
Well, we don't exactly know where our Podbean listeners are coming from, or where we do know where our live viewers are coming from, certainly, because we can look at those stats live as they're happening.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were not too happy with DLive, was it, right?
I am not thoroughly happy with DLive, no.
Okay. And it hasn't changed in the last week or whatever that it's been up, the show?
What do you mean?
It's still up on DLive?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so nothing
we are broadcasting
has changed.
to
It's still
DLive
not
right
getting
now.
any views or anything?
Oh, no, the show gets tons of views on DLive. It's my gaming streams that don't.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. This is the Call to Freedom. We're going to actually get into a topic in a moment, so don't go anywhere. This is the Call to Freedom. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. And if you've ever wanted to have sex with prostitutes and then arrest them, or bust people for drugs and then sell the drugs on the side for a nice little bonus.
The Trump administration appears ready to roll back healthcare protections for transgender people and add...
Good God, that scared the hell out of me. Why did it just suddenly start playing after being open for 47 freaking minutes? I hate you so much, Internet. So, that was something else I had pulled up. So anyway, go check out thinbluelinegame.com. You can have sex with prostitutes, arrest them, and, shoot people over broken tail lights, and then escape accountability with the magical phrase that you have feared for your life. So again, go check it out. That's thinbluelinegame.com. And for a temporary time, you can use the coupon code CTF to have all shipping costs waived. So go get it. Again, that's thinbluelinegame.com. You can also break into somebody's apartment, murder them, and then say it was dark and I thought it was my apartment. So all good stuff. Now, Chris, you brought in a story about measuring tires or something.
Well, it was actually Michael who sort of brought the story in. But Michael, if you don't want to do it, I'll be happy to.
You go right ahead.
Okay.
Well, somebody brought in a story about tires.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Well, sort of.
Talking tires.
Yeah. So apparently, let's see here. Where's the story?
So what are they doing? I mean, what is the issue here? Is that they're measuring people's distance from the tire to the line?
No, the parking enforcer puts a chalk mark on your tire when they come by, when they check your meter, and then the next time they come by, if your car's still there, they give you a parking ticket.
So the chalk line is like a warning?
It's a reminder to them, because some places have metered parking where you're only supposed to stay for like 2 hours. You're not supposed to be there longer than 2 hours, even if you feed the meter. So what they're doing with the chalk...
There are a few here in Keene that are like that, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what they're doing with the chalk is determining that car has still been parked there, because it was parked there when they made that mark 3 hours ago.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, chalking tires for parking enforcement ruled unconstitutional by federal appeals court.
Nice.
So, yeah, the story is from...
How is it unconstitutional?
It's a search.
Chalking a tire constitutes a search?
They can't attach a GPS device to a car either.
That's apparently what the court has ruled.
Yep.
I think I have to disagree here and take the position that although I'm not a fan of parking maids doing this, or meter maids, or whatever the politically correct term for these people is, I don't see why it could possibly be unconstitutional.
It's
property damage would be more sensible.
It's a trespass.
It's a trespass, right? So that's basically part of it. So regardless...
I don't know that I can agree it's a trespass.
It's more than a trespass. It's actually damage to your property. You can't go and touch somebody even if they don't get injured by it, so to speak, right? You would still be charged with battery and assault.
Right. That's the route that I would take in this, is that it's technically property damage.
It's both property damage and it's also trespass, which also means an illegal search. So
I don't know how it qualifies as trespass.
It sounds a bit out there, but I would agree with the general sentiment. The age-old parking enforcement practice of tire chalking is unconstitutional. A federal appeals court ruled Monday, saying it violated the Fourth Amendment's bar on unreasonable searches. Yeah, actually, even the lawyer thinks that fought this case, also was a bit surprised that he won.
It's like, oh wow, I can't believe that worked.
It's interesting because they lost initially and then they appealed it. So they won at the appeals level. So that's kind of interesting. It's going up the chain, and a higher court actually agrees with this conclusion. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit is in a first-of-its-kind decision ruled that marking a car's tires to gather information is a form of trespass, requiring a warrant, similar to a police attaching a GPS to a vehicle to track a suspect drug dealer. Now, it was until
police
recently...
do that?
Yes, they do.
It was until recently the case that police would attach GPS devices to vehicles, arguing that it's the same thing as me driving around and following the car, right? But the reality is...
Isn't that also illegal? Isn't that stalking?
They don't need a warrant for that. You would think, but the police get an exception, right? So it's not stalking when the police do it, apparently. So anyway...
I would disagree with the police, obviously. I think we all would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, reasonable human beings would, but...
Yeah. I don't necessarily know if I think stalking should be illegal. But... Well, I mean, look, if you're in public...
Hold on. I have to write down the time step for that.
Yes.
Because how you said that was just... perfect.
452.
If you're the thing is, if you're in public, right? It's one thing if you're stalking and you're trespassing and so on, because then you'd be committing a crime if you're warned to, stop trespassing and you don't. But in the case of being in public, it's I certainly don't encourage people to, do this, but I don't necessarily know that it should be illegal, because I'm still trying to figure out where exactly is the, damage being done? Where's the real danger? And I understand that it's a mental, type of thing, but that's really with the person who's being stalked, not so much with any kind of physical or thing that I think you can legitimately regulate. Or,
well, at least in regard to the police, it's intimidation.
Yeah, the police would be intimidation. I would give you that. And the question is, is intimidation also, is that something that should be illegal? And, well, when the police do it, probably. When a private individual does it, I don't know, maybe not. So let's continue. Parking attendants across the country have been chalking tires with big white lines for decades in zones without meters to enforce of time limits and issue tickets. It's a substantial source of revenue in many cities. Now, it's interesting, actually, how the court came to also the conclusion that it's illegal. So the decision, while undoubtedly bringing joy to parking scuffles everywhere, could cost some cities money, either from lost revenue or having to install meters when none exist. On the other hand, a Fourth Amendment expert, Orrin Kerr of the University of Southern California Law School, tweeted, "It seems easy enough these days for parking enforcers to just take a photo of the car or even just close-up photo of the tire rather than chalk it. No 4A issues then." So, in other words, no Fourth Amendment issues. The Sixth Circuit covers the states.
I mean, yeah, couldn't they just write it down in a notebook?
Yeah, they could.
Yeah, they could. They could do it any number of ways, or just mark the in front of the tire, the street.
Oh, then they wouldn't be able to prove that the car didn't leave for 5 minutes and then return. The chalk mark being in the same spot,
if the chalk mark doesn't get away, I mean, essentially they're assuming that the chalk mark's going to get wiped off when the car moves. So I guess if you moved the car, but it still had a chalk mark on it, it still isn't potentially evidence. Or what if I do my own chalk marks, right? How would they know whether it's their chalk mark or my chalk mark? It's not necessarily proof when anybody could have done it.
Well, I'm certainly not saying that they can go to a court and be like, no, see, look, I chalk marked this car and it was still there 2 hours later.
Yeah.
But, if the chalk is in the same position along the circular axis, then they know the car has not moved. Like, even if you just, pull out for a moment and pull back in, the angle of the chalk mark versus the angle to the street is going to be different. More than likely, you're not going to park in the exact same spot.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah. So let's continue. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution bars unreasonable searches, but U.S. District Court in Bay City, Michigan had dismissed the lawsuit, concluding that chalking, while a type of search, was not at all unreasonable. People have a lesser expectation of privacy in their cars than, for example, in their homes, the District Court ruled. Plus, the lower court said the Supreme Court has carved out a community caretaker exception to warrant requirements for routine parking and traffic enforcement so police can control hazards of clogged streets.
How is this a hazard?
Remember that word, hazard, because this is why they basically concluded that this is not they do need a warrant, basically.
So the issue is that the streets are congested. And because of that, they want to make sure that every 2 hours somebody gets out there and moves their vehicle.
That's what the original court said.
This is going to fix the street congestion to make people drive.
Something along those lines. Appeals court judge...
I don't think that's how that works.
Bernice Bowie Donald, writing for a unanimous 3-judge panel, reversed. Wow, a 3-judge panel unanimously reversed. That's interesting. I missed that part.
That's unusual.
Yeah. So this sounds like it has a lot of support higher up, maybe. She said traditional law on searches of vehicles had been upended by the Supreme Court's 2012 decision restricting the powers of police to use GPS devices to track criminal suspects. I think they mean without a warrant. Donald said the chalking of Taylor's car was just like the GPS installation, a trespass for the purpose of gathering incriminating information and therefore a Fourth Amendment violation when done without a warrant. She dismissed the caretaker exception, saying that Taylor's vehicle posed no safety risk. And that's the justification for the exception, the caretaker exception. So by there not being a safety risk, it's unconstitutional. The city was trying to raise revenue, not mitigate a public hazard, she wrote, which is the exact kind of argument that we would be making here as a libertarian.
So the judge said all of this?
Yes, this is what the judge said.
That's what the appeals court said.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk more about the idiocy of government and their attempts to turn us into sources of revenue to escape their need to raise taxes. This is the Call to Freedom. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get more into this. So stay tuned. Welcome back. This is The Call to Freedom. I'm your host, as always, Aria DeMezzo of Aria Uncensored, which will be on in about 5 hours. So be sure to check that out on twitch.lrn.fm and dlive.lrn.fm, where I do the show completely topless. It's live and uncensored, and I'll be joined tonight by Derek J. Freeman of Victimless Crime Spree, which you can watch at victimlesscrimespree.com. Probably. Something may have just come up, giving me something else to do tonight, something that I would substantially prefer to do. So I will find out by the end of Call to Freedom. Thunderbuds, I think, is going to ask me out.
Oh.
Yeah. And I will definitely drop Aria Uncensored tonight to do that. So anyway, I'm joined in the studio today by
Chris.
And Michael.
Chris, you're of Freedom
Yes, I do
your show.
Freedom Slanted tech show called Freedom Decrypted, and I'm also CEO of a tech company called Think Penguin that sells Linux and GNU and free software-friendly hardware.
Very cool. And Michael, you're of...
do a lot of little things. BitcoinHistory.com is the Bitcoin news aggregator. It's still running. It's not officially launched yet, but it's mostly working. I also run CryptoTip.org, which is
really cool.
Is a nice little outreach tool where you can.
Oh, you do Crypto Tip?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
go ahead and describe that.
Because one of the greatest websites ever for promoting cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, if you're into cryptocurrency and you actually want to spread the word about cryptocurrency by giving it to people.
You have said that at least 20 times on this show, and it's never clicked what you're referring to. I know what Crypto Tip is, right?
They're little tip cards.
Things.
They're awesome.
But for some
people
reason,
can redeem cryptocurrency.
Yeah, but for some reason, it just never occurred to me.
Yes, I built that. And if you want to spread the word, give people a little, like $1 or $2, $10, whatever dollars worth of crypto on a little piece of paper. They can scan that with their QR code, and it gives them kind of a nice little intro to whatever cryptocurrency. They can install a wallet on their phone, whatever, claim the crypto. If they don't claim the crypto, you get it back after a few days, a month, whatever.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I mean, preferably you would leave a cash tip as well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that they even mentioned that during one of the ads that plays here on Call to Freedom, or
I think,
the LRN Network.
There is an ad. I don't remember which slot it plays in, but yeah, I have heard the ad.
It plays at some point.
Yeah, I've given out lots of these, like restaurants and things. I'll leave the regular tip, whatever I would normally tip, and then I leave a $10 crypto tip. And most of the time, unfortunately, people won't redeem them. But the 1 in 10 times that it does get redeemed, somebody actually, gets a little bit of crypto to spend, and it helps increase and, just generally promote crypto acceptance.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing it because every Sunday night after work, now that we work with alcoholics, we go to a bar across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually just tip with my credit card, which I will continue doing, obviously, because you do want to give these people cash. But I will also leave a crypto tip. So
cool.
It's a good idea.
That will be cool. It's a really, if you are a cryptocurrency enthusiast, it's definitely something you can look into to help provide people with their first ever cryptocurrency. It's a really cool tool. I didn't know that was you. Even though you have told me that to my face here on the show.
Yeah, almost once a day, every day for a month or two.
So one thing you'll notice about all of us is we're really, really bad at marketing. Especially Michael and myself.
Well, certainly me too. I would agree. # me too.
Yeah.
I'm bad at marketing. I mean, there's so much psychology built into marketing. It's a question of how do you promote yourself in a way that is...
Most people tune out the marketing anyway. So it's like, you just
I will confess that's what I do when, you and Michael promote your shows and things like that, because I'm familiar with you. You're not trying to reach me anyway, right?
Maybe? I don't know.
So I guess it gets
are you
out.
into tech stuff, or are you into cryptocurrency?
I am into both cryptocurrency and tech stuff. And
okay, so then
stuff.
you're within the audience, I think, that for both of the things that we do.
Mark Edge said something to me quite a while back about ads. He said it takes repetitions, many repetitions, before it really clicks into someone's head. And we saw that today. You've heard me say it like 36 times or more, and just finally today you got it.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's probably something we should be saying like 3 times a show. Like just say the name, freedomdecrypted.com, freedomdecrypted.com, freedomdecrypted.com. Go to freedomdecrypted.com for your libertarian, freedom slanted tech show.
Yeah.
And just do that. Like, it doesn't even have to be long. Just like repetition randomly in the show.
Well, I mean, if you want to make an ad that runs during the show, we can have. I mean, I think we get 2 minutes per hour, basically at no cost. If you want to make an advertisement that runs during the commercials, that's fine. If you want to use it as your introduction when we come back at the top of the hours, that's also fine.
Yeah, it's something
I prefer
working on,
that.
so.
I thought we were doing the kind of the introduction at the top of the hour, but
We did, but yesterday we dropped it a few times and just said our names. And today, I think for the first hour, we just dropped it and said our names.
yeah. Then Chris was like, "Oh, I'm Chris."
I'm just terrible. Well, I'm terrible at this. Like, I'm not a marketing person. It's like, I don't know. I don't even know. I would do some sort of like write up or something, and I don't know. It could be right over the air or something like that. But I just haven't gotten around to it. There's just so much.
I asked you for a write up. In fact,
my plate.
didn't
you
I?
did. You did.
that was also about a month ago.
Probably a couple of times, and yes, probably a month or so ago. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So I mean, we can always read that. We have time slots available for the. For various times.
By the time I get around to it, we won't have those time slots.
God hoping we don't. But chasing down sponsors is always a nightmare, and I haven't even bothered this year because
It's time consuming.
Have we even promoted the fact that we're looking for sponsors on the show at all?
No.
Well, we probably should.
Well, yeah, we definitely should. But I'm of the mindset that when
We might need
Freedom,
an audience first.
when Call to Freedom was under someone else's, when it was under someone else's care, way too much money was being asked from people. Mm-hmm. Like $3,500 for 6-month sponsorships and things like that. I mean, we're not Free Talk Live.
That's true.
So we're not going to get numbers anywhere near like that. We are sponsored currently by Thin Blue Line Game.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that game.
That started in January. It wasn't done through most of the month of January, which is why I extended it for them until June.
Okay.
So we'll continue that until June the 1st, at which point I will probably seek to renew it with them, assuming that, we've been sending them purchases. Who knows, right? I haven't asked. I know that when we were sponsored by Helium, they did really well, and we pissed off a lot of our audience with it by promoting them because Helium had a bit of a glitch where, because of how it works, it kept putting people's money into Bitcoin Gold.
Oops.
All of their money into Bitcoin Gold.
No, don't do that.
No, I know, right? It seems like it would be a basic part of any sort of automatic money-moving process to not dump more than 50%, say 50%, into a single cryptocurrency.
Yeah, you've got to have some kind of like sanity checks in your code.
But they did. But they did not, rather. And they just kept pouring people's money into Bitcoin Gold. And everybody who listens to us and paid attention to that went from $500 in cryptocurrency to $30 in cryptocurrency. They were like, hey, this crap that you guys have been promoting.
I think this is just a good, demonstration of something you need to learn in life. Take baby steps, right? Like, just because somebody is promoting something on the air or in a YouTube video or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that even the people who are part of it are necessarily supportive of the product, even though they're being paid to promote the product.
Yeah, we
sometimes
used to have that disclaimer on our show, and
sometimes you do support the product, but
we have more
you don't.
integrity than that. We're not going to support a product that we don't actually believe in and are willing to stand by. The issue with Helium, it was a great product, was that its coder did not implement this basic concept, and we had no way of knowing that because it wasn't open source. And even if it was, neither me nor Will nor Tom had the technical capacity to dig through the code.
Or time, for that matter.
Yeah, or time to dig through something at that scale. Yeah, absolutely. But we loved Helium. We're still friends with the guy who makes it, but the software did have that little issue. And as soon as it started causing people to lose massive amounts of money, while we continued to talk about it and promote the service, we added the caveat that it appeared to be experiencing issues.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Thin Blue Line Game, which is created by people who I sort of not personally know, but Facebook know, I guess.
I got you.
Members of the Audacious Caucus. And of course, it's a card game that demonizes cops. Well, they demonize themselves, and the Thin Blue Line Game just points it out.
Yeah.
So, all good stuff. But yeah, we haven't really spent any time looking for sponsors because I want to grow the show and an audience first. I want that to be my priority, not getting paid. This is the Call to Freedom. I don't know why we're doing this, but we're going to get into a topic, so don't go anywhere. I love that intro. It falls apart so quickly, though, and just stops sounding so awesome. About right where we cut it off, it just starts sounding like a pretty generic heavy metal song. But that first part is very well done. So welcome back to the Call to Freedom. You're invited to give us a call at 603-283-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160, or you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. And I have just made a note to delete and recreate the IFTTT posts because they don't seem to be working. I've now tested it 3 times since they were turned off. They probably turned off automatically when I deactivated my Facebook account for that extended period.
Yeah, that's probably it's probably what happened.
That's why the Podbean broke.
That's why it didn't. Yeah. That's why it stopped auto posting to Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't go back through and re-authenticated. I did that earlier, so
this is why we got to check stuff. I have the same problem. Like every once in a while, I need to go back and check to make sure everything is working.
Yeah.
Like I do a pre-record, a pre-test for every show that I do, and then I also every once in a while I'm just like, let me see if the stream still works, and just like run the video and go and check from another computer on another internet connection.
Interesting.
It's interesting what
Good idea.
what you might find or discover. Like I found that we had like an issue with our SSL certificate for the stream. The site worked fine, but I don't know if it was like 30 shows I did with a self-signed SSL certificate, or
oops,
if it was if it was just like a couple of shows, because I've had other people watch the feed. I know for sure, and nobody has said anything about it. So
could be their players just don't care.
It may have just occurred, like I don't know what exactly happened, but it just might have just occurred that past week, and I don't know. I had no rational explanation for why it happened or when it happened or anything really.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing is that we set up these things, and because we're all tech people, we set them up correctly. Obviously.
Yeah.
And we just expect them to work after that.
But they don't necessarily just
No,
work.
but
you can have certificates that expire, you can have
But it's a foreign concept to us, I would say. Well, the expiration on the SSL certificate is certainly one thing, but to me, I know that I set up this thing correctly. It's all automatic. Barring some bizarre glitch, it should continue working until the end of time.
Yeah.
Basically.
You would hope, but I think in practice, in the real world, stuff happens.
Stuff breaks.
Stuff breaks.
It does.
Whether it's a piece of hardware that fails or an SSL certificate that expires, or I don't even know. Somebody hacks into the system. I mean, it may almost never happen, but one of those things is bound to happen at some point, and probably multiple points. Maybe you forgot to turn on, I don't know, one time I forgot to turn on the mixer. So there was no audio for an entire show. And now you know why.
Oops.
Every show I pre-test to make sure that everything is working before I begin a show.
Yeah.
It's just because it just takes that one time where you forget to do something and you didn't do that test, and then all of a sudden you do 3-hour show, and it's like, what a waste of time.
I did that the day before yesterday, during a video game stream, actually, where I didn't test it beforehand because the settings were all still there. But I have made a lot of changes to my sound card throughout the last week because I want some applications to use this sound card, some applications to use another sound card, and so on. So I didn't check it, and it turns out that there was absolutely no sound from the game whatsoever through the entire stream.
Oops.
So it was just a ton of silence, and then me saying something, and then more silence.
You know what? I just realized it wasn't actually the mixer that I didn't have on. It was the mixer was not connected to the computer. So the recording and the stream had no audio from the microphone, but I could hear myself because my headphones are hooked up to the mixer, and the mixer was doing output, so I could hear my voice, but it was not being recorded by the computer.
That's awkward.
Yeah.
Oh, I did make a post on Facebook to let people know that our podcasts haven't been posting, and we'll get that fixed. And in the meantime, go to Spotify, Podbean, Google Play Music, iTunes, or wherever, and listen to us live.
Now, is there a link? I know Free Talk Live has, I'm trying to remember what the link is, but there's a link for different...
archive.freetalklive.com, I think is...
No, but like, how would I get to, say, iTunes, or how would I get to... we're on Discord, presumably, right? So is there a link on... Call to Freedom that you can direct people to so they know how to get to the Discord channel or the
there's
iTunes?
A few questions in that. The Call to Freedom website is currently down.
Yikes.
Well, they only take cryptocurrency, and I don't have accessible cryptocurrency at the moment due to having instead a broken phone. So I can't. So I can't just whip it out and send them some Bitcoin.
You get that fixed.
Yeah, and I actually have somebody who's going to fix it for about $20, which is a lot better than the $100 that I was going to spend otherwise on it. So at that price range, I'm willing to pay to get it fixed. But right now, even with the cryptocurrency on it, it would just be about breaking even because I don't carry a lot of cryptocurrency on a given basis. So,
how about donations? Is there anything for donations where people can donate?
There's Patreon.
Yeah, there's patreon.com/call-to-freedom.
Any donations coming in for it?
Yeah, $34 a month.
Okay, so that can help cover the costs?
It does help cover the costs.
Does it completely cover the cost? Or is it
completely covers the cost of the podcast.
Okay.
It does not fully cover the cost of both the podcast and the website, which is currently down right now anyway.
Okay.
Which is my fault. It's not because of any financial reason or anything like that. It's because the hosting site only takes cryptocurrency.
Okay. So basically what that means, guys, is make some donations and help us get the show back up.
Good point. Well, I mean, yeah, but it's not a money issue. I mean, ideally, yes, I would not have to pay any of that out of my own pocket, which is what I was doing before. And I actually sent an invoice to the previous owner of Call to Freedom, like, hey, I just paid this $119, and I'd kind of like this money back now that we have this sponsorship coming from Bitcoin.com that never came through. So,
okay.
But I mean, it's not necessarily because the $34 a month, I think it would technically still be about $5 short each month. But I mean, the Patreon page is pretty new as well.
Okay.
So that's pretty good. We have a small number of very dedicated fans.
Awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, fully, no, it would not cover the cost of both the websites and the podcast, primarily because there's some conversion fees in there in getting this money into PayPal and then converting it somehow into Bitcoin and then sending the Bitcoin to the web host. That's a lot of delay. It's a lot of transaction fees, plus Patreon takes their cut and all of that. PayPal takes their cut. So every little bit, it gets chipped at by other people.
Is your best way to make a donation is with cryptocurrency, correct? Because
indeed.
Then there's no fees, conversion fees from one to the other.
That would be fantastic.
So is there a link somewhere that people can send cryptocurrency?
On the website that's down?
There is not. And I would like to have a separate wallet for the show.
That's what I do for Freedom Decrypted.
Yeah, that isn't accessible to any one party, maybe a multi-signature wallet or something like that.
That's actually probably a good idea.
Yeah. So we should probably be doing a show instead of planning a show right now.
You're probably right.
This is the Call to Freedom. Don't worry about it. We're going to get into a topic, so don't go anywhere.
You're not enjoying this inside baseball?
I think it's interesting, to be honest. But...
Yeah, I think it's probably interesting to people.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. This is the Call to Freedom. We'll be back. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. And we've been having a bit of irrelevant discussion, stuff that, I mean, we don't sit down together often to have these sorts of conversations that we've been having anyway.
Almost never, to be honest.
Yeah. So
I don't know we've ever really had this discussion.
No, I don't think so. It's a good conversation to have. Yeah. So, but Chris, you actually have a story now.
I do.
About censorship.
I do. Well, no, let's see. It's not about censorship. It's about so this is a really awesome story from Forbes. Utah bans police from searching digital data without a warrant. Closes Fourth Amendment loophole. So basically, police can search your phone, or at least that's the theory, legally, without getting a warrant, like when they pull you over on the side of a road.
Or they could. Rather,
they do, and so this is basically closing that loophole.
Good.
And interestingly, it's a Utah of all states that have pass this law. Because it's interesting because just last week I feel like it was like they were talking about passing a law that would mandate that all electronic devices have a censorship filter built into them. Now, how that's supposed to work with something like, I don't know, a USB switch.
Yeah, that's impossible.
Or like just not even a USB switch, but even just like a Ethernet switch that doesn't have any onboard firmware or anything of that nature. Everything is done in hardware. How is that supposed to work? I could understand that you could do it with a phone or a computer, but there's all sorts of electronic devices that don't really have the mechanisms to do some sort of censorship filter. And then what would they be censoring? That's the next question.
Porn.
What, a USB switch? You'd be censoring porn between like
isn't that what they wanted to
and the
do?
computer? I mean, isn't
that what they sought to do? Wasn't that the entire point?
It was about porn and protecting the children. I put that in quotes. But yeah, I mean, so the state, and this is the state with the Mormons, and
yes, it is.
It's a very it's got
very
its own,
socially conservative.
Yes, it's got its own
special underwear.
That's not where I was going with that, but that's true too. No, I mean, it's got its own. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's its own special
underwear. It's got its own special culture.
Yeah,
right.
It's got its own different culture, and yes, definitely a conservative-ish culture. I don't necessarily know. I mean, I've been around Mormons, and I don't necessarily know that it's the same as like the South or conservatives or say the Middle East conservatives. I feel like they each have their own. There's differences, but nonetheless,
absolutely.
But yeah, the Mormons seem to be very anti-porn, to say the least, and it may not be to the same degree as people from the Middle East, where if you in some places where if a woman does not have her headscarf on, a full veil, it's like she'll be stoned to death.
I think that's only Saudi Arabia.
I don't even think it's Saudi Arabia. I think it's like Afghanistan. But yeah, I think Saudi Arabia does have like full veil requirements too. But I don't necessarily know that they would stone a woman to death if something got exposed by accident or something.
I don't know. People are nuts.
Yeah, I mean, some places are more. They take it further than other places, and certainly there's certain places in the Middle East that. Women, I don't even know they have to have. Definitely, they don't have to have a full veil. So the face basically is covered, so they can expose the face, but they still have to have the rest of the veil to cover the hair and stuff like that. So let's get into the story. So in a major win for digital privacy, Utah became the first state in the nation to ban warrantless. This is not all good news, though, by the way. Warrantless searches of electronic data. Under the Electronic Information or Data Privacy Act, state law enforcement can only access someone's transmitted or stored digital data, including writing, images, and audio, if a court issues a search warrant based on probable cause.
So
far, good news.
So if they pull you over and they want to search your phone, it is now it is recognized by the courts as being an unreasonable search.
Right. And so the reason, essentially, there's an exception to the whole warrant requirement for people transient in vehicles anyway, and the logic is something to the effect of, because you can leave, you can move, you can get away, essentially, and they can't go and get a warrant and then come back later. That the officer
could.
only needs to have probable cause themselves. They don't necessarily have to get the warrant. So as long as they have probable cause, they can theoretically search the phone pretty much in any other state, I guess, at this point. And it can any evidence they find would be usable in court. But yeah. Simply put, the Act ensures that search engines, email providers, social media, cloud storage, and any other third-party electronic communication service or remote computing service are fully protected under the Fourth Amendment and its equivalent in the Utah Constitution. So this is actually interesting because it sounds like it's going even farther than that, because normally also...
So they can't search your email and stuff either.
Right, theoretically. Now, this is at the state level, not the federal level.
Right.
And what that means is basically the federal government can still do it even though the state government can't. So you still want to preferably have your own email server set up in your own building or wherever you're renting your office or whatever, and not necessarily use Gmail, because once you use Gmail and emails are stored on Gmail servers, all of a sudden they don't need a warrant to get access to that either necessarily.
And you don't have control over it. You can delete a message in Gmail, but you can't be sure it's actually gone.
Right.
It disappears, but you don't know you don't know if they're just hiding it.
So from what my interpretation of this is that now the government, the state of Utah, basically police, will have to get a subpoena in order to gain access to those emails. They can't simply ask Gmail to hand those emails over. So HB 57 also contains provisions that promote government transparency and accountability. In most cases, once agencies execute a warrant, they just then notify owners within 14 days that their data has been searched. Even more critically,
Good Lord.
HB 57 will prevent the government from using...
It's not a requirement that you have to be there at the time that these searches happen?
It's apparently not.
Well, I mean, I think they're talking about
cloud search,
third-party services. So
yeah, but
Google
still,
or whatever.
It seems like you should be required by law to
be
be
notified
there.
of a search. Well, yeah, I mean, basically, your what you have in your home is protected, but what somebody else has on you is not protected, and that's the key thing.
Okay.
So HB 57 will prevent the government from using illegally obtained digital. Now, this is also interesting. So if they do illegally obtain the evidence, they will not be allowed to use it in court. So that's an interesting argument to bring up, at least in Utah for now. Hopefully this gets passed in other states, except without some of these exceptions, because I'm not a fan of exceptions. But in a concession to law enforcement, the act will let police obtain location tracking information or subscriber data without a warrant if there's imminent risk of death, serious physical injury, sexual abuse, live stream sexual exploitation, kidnapping, or human trafficking. So this is basically...
Those are all pretty vague.
Yeah, they are.
And it's going to be used to attack sex workers the same way that all...
Yeah,
human
potentially.
trafficking does.
I mean, so this is an exception that's already carved out in law. Like normally, if a police officer hears somebody screaming, because they're being raped and they're screaming for help, they can enter without a warrant the property. Okay,
I mean, it's stuff they're already doing.
Yeah, it's stuff that they're already basically allowed to do, and this is just kind of expanding that within the context of this law for digital data.
It's still kind of problematic because what could possibly be stored within your emails that could help them find you during a crime you're committing that they couldn't find through some other mechanism or through information that they already have access to?
Yeah, I think essentially, it kind of makes me wonder, considering how broadly they probably are defining sexual abuse. It, as a good example, probably, it probably means that they're essentially they're not required to have a warrant if somebody is, I don't know, like they suspect somebody of some sort of.
Well, what does Utah consider to be sex abuse? Masturbation?
I don't know, but yeah, I mean, this is, and they call that self-mutilation from what I understand. So if a 13-year-old is, doing the deed to himself, that would theoretically, they consider that to be like basically rape in a lot of states. It's absurd, but
raping himself?
Yeah, there's a legal term for it, and it's from what I understand, it's self-mutilation.
I know they use that in prison.
Yeah,
but I didn't know there was anybody out there trying to use it in wider society.
I do believe that is the case. Yeah, it's not maybe everywhere, but it's
crazy.
It exists outside of the prison system.
That is crazy. This is the Call to Freedom. We're going to talk more about Utah's crazy laws, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. As always, you're invited to give us a call at 603-283-6160. And we would like to remind you that our podcasts, as we've been discussing, have moved and are no longer located at Spreaker. Instead, you can find them on Podbean at calltofreedomlive.podbean.com. You can also find them on Spotify, which I need to check and make sure is still working based on all of the issues we've been having. The iTunes Store, and Google Play Music, which I also need to check into now that I've brought up the topic. Because for all I know, those aren't still working.
We can find out.
I use Spotify a lot, not ordinarily to listen to the show. I'll be honest, I don't listen to the show.
Yeah, we do the show every day. We don't listen to it. later.
I do listen to Free Talk Live when I'm available, and Freer Talk Live when I'm available, but I don't. And I spot check our shows before I upload the podcasts and things like that to make sure everything is still recording properly, that our volume levels are still right, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, shows on Spotify. Well, yesterday's show was just uploaded 2 hours ago.
Yep, that's exactly right. So that's good news. I haven't checked it. But Spotify's still working. So we were talking about these insane laws in Utah.
Well, in this case, well, yeah, I guess the law they were proposing was insane. This one's not. This one I think is pretty good. I mean, other than their exception here. So yeah, backed by the ACLU of Utah and the Liberatus Institute, the act went through 5 different substitute versions before it was finally approved, without a single vote against it. Without a single vote against it. Now that is amazing. Last month, HB 57 is slated to take effect in mid-May. Ensuring that the Fourth Amendment is still relevant can sound like an obvious common sense reform, and it is. Yet Utah's new law is also a surprisingly radical break from the status quo, thanks to the third-party doctrine in 49 states and on the federal level. The government can access a striking amount of private data without a search warrant simply by working through third parties. Yeah, I mean, this is basically what I was saying. I mean, it's pretty crazy the amount of like exceptions to your rights that have been carved out over the years, and it was back in the 70s that they actually carved out this particular one. So back in the late 1970s, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a pair of decisions that upheld the warrantless searches of bank records and dialed phone numbers. And then, of course, it got extended. In both cases, the court ruled that the defendants' Fourth Amendment rights were not violated because they had no legitimate expectation of privacy, which sounds like utter nonsense to me.
These were terrible rulings. And
were.
They're still affecting us today.
Yeah.
That's like contending that because I told Michael something in confidence, I should have no expectation of privacy if the police then, torture Michael to get it from him. It's like, well, you shouldn't have been expecting privacy in the first place.
It's insane.
Right.
That's insane.
Right. Since they had voluntarily conveyed the information at hand to third parties.
What?
Exactly.
I don't even know that most people realize that they're even conveying that information to a third party. They're entering it into a machine. The fact that their information is then being recorded by a third party is unbeknownst to them. The third-party doctrine, in other words, opened a massive loophole that bypasses the Fourth Amendment, letting the government collect reams of very personal information. Unfortunately, HB 57 does not extend to so this is what's also interesting. HB 57 does not extend to medical or financial records held by third parties, leaving Utahns still vulnerable to warrantless snooping. You would think that's like, isn't that protected at like the federal level, like to a really insane degree?
Like things like HIPAA? No, HIPAA is not about protecting patient privacy. It's protecting the government's access to that information.
Really?
I thought it was all about protecting hospitals from litigation risks.
Well, that too. But
interesting.
No, it's less about keeping your information private. It's more about making sure the federal government can keep access to it.
I believe that I could definitely believe that, but that's definitely not how I remember it. Every time I read something, I always remember it being sold as,
certainly
to protect your privacy.
That's how they're going to bill it, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
P stands for portability.
Last year, the Supreme Court narrowed the third-party doctrine in Carpenter versus the United States by a margin of 5-4. The court ruled that accessing time-stamped mobile phone records, so this was another good ruling, known as cell site location information. Now, mind you, it was only a 5-4 decision, so yeah, this stuff could potentially be reversed. Qualifies as a search under the Fourth Amendment. A person does not surrender all Fourth Amendment protection by venturing into the public sphere. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority, where the government tracks the location of a cell phone, it archives near perfect surveillance, or achieves near perfect surveillance. Roberts warned, as if it had attached an ankle monitor to the phone's user. If the government wants to access CSLI, the Chief Justice bluntly told them to get a warrant.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. In Carpenter, Roberts acknowledged that CSLI does not fit neatly under existing precedences, and since it's a form of personal location information maintained by a third party. As a result, the court declined to extend Smith and Miller, given the unique nature of cell phone location records, he wrote. The fact that the information is held by a third party does not by itself overcome the user's claim to Fourth Amendment protections. Yeah, this was another good ruling.
It's a surprising ruling because they don't usually rule in this way. They're usually like, oh, yeah, the state can totally have access to all of your data. What do you mean Fourth Amendment?
And they usually a lot of these rulings actually get rolled on in the wrong way because of emotional nonsense. There's some case that
it's for the kids. Yeah,
everybody hates the individual that is being targeted, and it's kind of reminds me of the ACLU and why they fought for essentially the Ku Klux Klan. And a lot of people were in an uproar over, but they failed to understand that if you don't ensure the rights of those you hate, you will end up creating a precedent that can be used against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all understand this.
Right. You have to kind of stand up and hold your nose and fight for the protection of those you don't like. But unfortunately, most people are emotional and not logical, rational individuals, and even the Supreme Court, unfortunately, I can think of a number of rulings that have occurred over the years where the decisions were clearly emotional based rulings and not rational, logical rulings, and then we all end up suffering as a result from it.
Certainly, I think hate crime laws are probably one of the best examples, as we were talking about earlier, and how they're ultimately used against the people that they were supposed to protect in the first place, because eventually they get to a point where they're just protecting the state.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a perfect example of that sort of thing. I don't necessarily know that we've seen any of that go up before, like the Supreme Court, but I certainly think that's something that should be overturned.
The Supreme Court ruled that you have the right to flip off police officers.
That is true. So I guess in the case of the
give it a try though and see what happens.
I am good on that. I can guess what would happen.
I am imagining that probably would override the protection of police, or being categorized as a special category of user or person, individual that is protected, right? So it's not necessarily everybody who's protected. You can flip off potentially another white person, but you can't do the same thing to a black person if you're white.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you're white and you flip off a black cop, is that hate speech?
I think the answer would be no, it's not, because of the way the U.S. ruled in that one particular case against cops. But I don't necessarily think that if you did it to a non-cop, I think theoretically that it would constitute a hate crime still, because they didn't overrule the hate crime law. They simply said that you can say whatever you want to a cop and you can't be persecuted for it.
Did they go that far? I thought it was just
is that not
flipping them off?
Is that not what flipping off would be? I mean, I guess
flipping
they didn't
someone off
technically.
Is speech.
I think that essentially what the ruling was about speech, right? So
interesting. We should look more into this, because I don't know if it was that broad.
It's a good question. Is usually these things aren't that broad, but I would suspect that if you tried to fight it, if you bringing it to the Supreme Court again, I think ultimately that's what they're going to rule. But you're right. It's a lot of these things are pretty narrow, so using it. You may not be able to, or the prosecutor may argue against it at a lower level, and you might lose based on the fact that that was narrow, even though they would still rule the same way at a higher level if you continue to fight it and it keeps going up to the Supreme Court again.
I wouldn't recommend doing it anyway, because if you're flipping off cops, they're going to find something.
They'll find something else,
quote unquote, legitimate to get you for.
Yeah, disorderly conduct.
Maybe you didn't use a blinker at some point, and they pull you over and tag you for that. They'll find something.
They will. They definitely will. They'll make it up if they can't find something, too.
You think so?
Oh, yeah, because they know you're going to have to fight it, and that costs money and everything else, or you'll just plead guilty. So.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, cops suck. And this is the Call to Freedom. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk more about this, so stay tuned. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. As always, I am your host, Aria DeMezzo of Aria Uncensored, which is probably going to be on tonight at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch it at dlive.lrn.fm or twitch.lrn.fm because as I was talking about earlier,
Thunderbuds hasn't got back to you?
Well, he has, yeah. But not anything concrete yet. But even if I do end up going to dinner with him, which I obviously would, it's not going to take up the entire night.
You'll be done before 10.
Yeah, he's got a kid, and it would be a first date, so I wouldn't be banging him or anything like that.
In theory.
Well, I'm more restrained than that. So
okay,
yeah. So anyway,
who are the rest of the people?
Tune in
on the
for
show?
that. Tune in for that if you want to watch it. I'm going to be joined tonight by Derek J. Freeman. It's going to be real. I've never done a show with him, so.
Oh, he is a riot.
Yeah, but it depends on chemistry. Sometimes there's good chemistry. Sometimes there isn't.
Interfere with the date.
Why would it?
I'll be quiet now.
And I don't want you to be quiet. We're joined in the studio now by
Chris
of
Freedom Decrypted.
There you go.
Big Penguin, a tech company.
Now you got it. And I'm Michael from CryptoTip.org.
So we intended to get into this earlier, and we never actually did because we instead started talking about other things. So law enforcement officials have been trying to stem the opioid crisis in America with criminal charges for street dealers and cartel kingpins who traffic in drugs like oxycodone and fentanyl, both of which are trafficked by pharmaceutical companies.
Yes,
right?
That they are.
But now, for the first time, federal authorities are bringing the same kind of felony drug trafficking charges against a major pharmaceutical distributor and two of its former executives for their roles in fanning the crisis.
Now, how is the pharmaceutical company responsible for fanning the opioid crisis? This doesn't make sense to me because
the opioids.
I know the argument for this if you want to hear it.
Yeah, if you can explain this to me.
Yeah. So basically, it sounds like something that's been going on for a number of years. And basically what was happening was the pharmaceutical companies are supposed to be like preventing those who are drug traffickers from getting a hold of the drugs that they produce.
Isn't that what the whole prescription system was for?
Yeah. So basically what's going on is that the distribution to the pharmacies, it doesn't, the numbers that are being distributed to the pharmacies, okay, if they don't match up. For example, a town has 30,000 people and millions of doses of whatever drug are being shipped to that little town, you can be reasonably sure that something is going on that isn't supposed to be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And basically what the pharmacies were doing was, or the distributors, the drug manufacturers were doing, was they were simply increasing the number that would cause them to have to investigate. So, and they keep doing this.
They just raised that threshold and just ignored stuff.
Right, indefinitely. Therefore, they never actually had to investigate. And so that's basically the whole argument.
So they just kept raising the opiate ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. As whenever a town needed more opioids or a pharmacy needed more opioids, it just kept getting raised basically indefinitely. So it never actually caused a we better investigate situation.
Interesting. So the government's novel tactic was expected to reverberate through the pharmaceutical industry, where large corporations and senior executives have long escaped criminal culpability for the epidemic of overdoses from prescription painkillers. The company, Rochester Drug Cooperative, or RDC, was charged on Tuesday in federal court with conspiring to distribute drugs and defrauding the government.
What? What does that even mean, defrauding the government?
That doesn't make any sense to me either.
Well, you're not allowed to lie to the government, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So they're basically making the argument that because they were, they never investigated that was fraud. It just seems absurd. I mean, technically,
they may have promised to investigate if they felt that something was amiss.
Right, if something was amiss, but they increased the numbers, therefore nothing was amiss.
Well, technically, sure.
So how is that fraud?
I don't know. But instead, the company entered into an agreement under which the government will hold off prosecuting the company itself on the charges as long as it pays a $20 million fine.
Yep.
So that's just it.
We'd rather have your money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's nothing. The pharmaceutical industry is billions of dollars.
Here's a check.
In terms of, the finances, like individual companies, let alone the industry, right? So this $20 million is basically not even a slap on the wrist.
No, that's just the government saying, hey, we want some money.
Yeah, basically it's extortion.
Yeah, so this is stupid. I mean, it's a good precedent. In that worldview, I don't think the government can fix the problem no matter what they do to these pharmaceutical companies.
No, because that's not where the problem is. The problem is prohibition.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even that won't fix the problem. It just makes it where we no longer consider it illegal. The problem is still there.
The question is, what is the problem, right? And then, which I mean, is the problem...
The problem is empty people leading desolate lives who turn to drugs as a means to escape the wretched conditions in which they found themselves.
Some of them are.
It, but
others are people that need painkillers and can't get them and have to turn to street drugs.
Right. I mean, I think
that's
a
very small minority of people.
Isn't the whole opioid crisis primarily caused by the doctors overprescribing, opioids, and then people ending up on heroin? I mean, isn't that kind of how we got to this situation where we have this crisis? So to speak?
Yes, but that's very different from saying that, drug dealing is out of control because people can't get opiates. So they're just buying them off the street. Eventually, in order to deal with legitimate pain, which is what Michael was saying.
I mean, there are people that get hooked on heroin because they had a back injury or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is a good question. I mean, maybe the advice that doctors are giving is the real problem, and that's where the issue needs to be focused, not arresting drug dealers.
No, from what I understand, they're actually going after doctors for so-called overprescribing opiates when they were just writing normal prescriptions.
I mean, I think that's kind of ridiculous too, but it seems like
I've got some personal experience on this particular subject.
If there's a problem, then it's an education issue. It shouldn't be treated as a criminal issue.
And it is certainly true that there are doctors who function as Dr. Feelgoods and who will prescribe you. I
don't doubt it.
My regular physician in Mississippi was the type who would sit down and ask you what you want.
Right.
And then he would write them.
Okay.
My sister, who also got addicted to painkillers and is now on Suboxone. I'm not. I just kicked the habit. She went to a different doctor and he was writing her, I think, 60 10 milligram Lortabs every week and 120 10 milligram Percocets every month on top of each other. Same doctor.
Wow.
And on one particular instance, they managed to con a pharmacy into letting them fill all 3 of the Lortab prescriptions in a single week. And then because they had exhausted those, they went back to the doctor and he wrote them an additional one.
Wow.
And it gets to a point where, that's probably criminal negligence. He knew. There's no way to not know. I mean, how did you exhaust 3 prescriptions?
It seems to me, though, that the issue, is it criminal negligence or was he simply providing the services which was being requested? Because if the doctor is somehow deceiving the person into taking prescriptions that they that it would be, then that would be negligence. Right. But if it's simply providing the service that both parties know is basically an abuse of the drug, is it still negligence? And I would say no.
I don't know. That's an interesting topic we need to get into a bit more, though, because it raises a lot of interesting questions about if you knew that somebody was going to use a gun to shoot themselves, if you knew that for a fact, would it be immoral for you to loan them your gun?
No.
And that's ultimately the question here.
Maybe not, but I wouldn't do it.
If you knew they were using it to shoot someone else, would it be immoral? This is the Call to Freedom. We're back, and we'll try to answer these deep, complicated questions, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. Sorry about that. And you're invited to give us a call at 603-288 603-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160. Or you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. If you would like clearer quality, like you can only get there on Discord. And we actually have someone sitting in one of the Discord rooms now. Just sit tight, Liberty Phoenix, and we'll be over with you in a moment. So we've been having a conversation about whether doctors have any actual responsibility for overprescribing medication. And Chris seems to be taking the perspective that they are simply providing a service.
I think if they're not, if both parties are knowingly, if the doctor is at least either knows or made the patient aware that, this is not, how do I say this, appropriate, or this is not,
dangerous.
Yeah, this is dangerous. I think then at that point, it's not immoral, I guess.
Well, the doctor took the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, something like that.
I don't know. I think when you're forced to take that oath, is it legitimate? And I would argue,
are they forced to take it?
Yeah, they're forced to take it in order to get the degree, and the degree is required.
Oh, well, it's definitely not legitimate. Then it's extorted from them, basically.
Right.
I would be concerned about going to a doctor who did not voluntarily submit themselves to that oath, however.
I think you're right, but I think at the same time, it invalidates all oaths as a result. Like, you can't know which doctors legitimately took the oath and which ones didn't, because they're all forced to.
That's true. But, I mean, you can certainly get a feel for it. I didn't know it was forced. It certainly explains a lot. But you can certainly get a feel for it by visiting the doctor. Like my regular physician here at Planned Parenthood, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that she's in medicine because she wants to help people.
Sure.
She almost certainly would have taken the Hippocratic Oath voluntarily. Versus the doctor I'm thinking about in Mississippi, Dr. Feelgood, who would have just done substantial harm if, I had pursued that particular avenue. I didn't. For whatever reason, I never, even while I was addicted to them, I never wanted them to be that accessible that I could just go to a doctor and get a ton of them. To me, that's how you that's how you take a relatively innocuous painkiller addiction, an expensive but innocuous painkiller addiction, and turn it into a life-destroying heroin addiction.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an issue. This is certainly a health issue, and it should be treated as a health problem, not as one where
not as a criminal problem.
As a criminal issue.
But if it's a health issue and you can't trust the doctors to deal with it responsibly, because they're just looking at people as customers.
It takes two parties. So
you can't trust the state to deal with it.
Right.
Well, nobody on this show is suggesting that we have the state deal with it.
That's true. I think ultimately it took two parties to make that bad decision essentially happen. You had the doctor who was probably not making the most ethical of decisions. But then you also had, and I don't even necessarily know that the doctor is making an unethical decision by prescribing it to somebody who's abusing it, simply because you also have the situation, well, if you don't prescribe it, then they're going to go through, the person who is addicted is going to go to another source that may be even more dangerous for them.
Well, I've been in a sort of similar situation, actually, as the owner of an IT firm. I had an attorney client wanting me to route a phone so that we could pull its backups, its text message backups off of it in a divorce settlement because the husband whose phone it was had been buying drugs.
Okay.
And the wife wanted to use that against him in order to get more money or more custody of the kids or whatever. I don't know exactly what the details were of the case. My job was just, we need access to these text messages. Here is why. Here is why we don't have the information that would allow you to access them legitimately, but we still need them. And it was a job I turned down because I didn't think it would be moral for me to help them punish this guy for his personal choices that, in my opinion, were harming no one.
Yeah, and I think that's an ethical decision that one has to make. I don't necessarily know if the decision there is, assisting with that service is not necessarily going to change anything. Just because, if one person doesn't do it, another person will. but at the same time, certainly,
not necessarily. I was certainly the only person at that part of Mississippi with the technical capabilities of doing that.
Okay. So maybe in that particular case, it would have helped, but in a lot of cases, it's not going to make any difference. And often, sometimes, doing essentially the wrong thing is kind of the right thing to do, in a weird sense, because ultimately, it's gonna do more harm to do the right thing.
I mean, isn't that like kind of saying, I'm not going to attempt to resist paying taxes because the government is going to pay for bombs and drop them on kids anyway? Isn't that essentially the same argument?
Sounds like it to me.
This is already going to happen, so it doesn't care so it doesn't matter if I protest it.
I'm probably thinking about other circumstances, more like supplying hardware to the government or something of that nature. Technically what they're doing with that hardware is maybe dropping bombs, but it doesn't really make any difference whether or not you take the money or whether or not a competitor takes the money. If the competitor takes the money, they're going to reinvest that into maybe, making more deadly weapons. Whereas if you take the money, it's not going to be used for that. And you'll be getting some of that money back that was stolen.
But you will bear the personal responsibility.
You'll be contributing to those bombs being dropped directly.
Maybe not. You don't even necessarily know what the hardware is going to be used for, right? So,
well, you have a pretty good idea if you're selling missiles to the government.
If you're selling anything to the Department of Defense.
Well, if it's a missile, maybe, but I'm not even thinking of missiles. I'm just thinking like a computer, for example, or, a Wi-Fi adapter. I mean, this is something that I personally I've done. So like I have been in this situation.
I would say that you still have some moral responsibility. If you sell a Wi-Fi adapter to the state and it installs it into a computer that ultimately makes its way into the U.S. Army or whatever.
But you would have no way of knowing where it's going to end up, right? Like
it's going to end up
but
somewhere.
Why take the risk? Why stand out on the street shooting a loaded gun if you know there's a 1% chance it might hit somebody?
That you wouldn't discriminate against any other individual. Like let's take the cake situation as a good example. I don't think the law should mandate that a baker bakes a cake for a gay couple, even though I would personally bake a cake for a gay couple, even if I didn't agree with gay people like being able to get married, right?
Sure.
And that's just simply a principle of non-discrimination, and it's the same thing kind of with the government from my perspective. I'm not going to discriminate against the government, just generally speaking.
But the government murders people.
Yeah, what the government does.
What the government does. Flippantly.
Yeah, I mean, what the government does is it's partly about personal responsibility. It's the government murdering people it's wrong. It's not my wrong.
Well, when you facilitate it by selling them equipment,
I don't necessarily
wrong.
know if I agree that it is facilitating. It's you don't have control over other people and what they do. Okay, I think I would disagree with that. It's facilitating. I think it's kind of a misuse of the word.
I don't. I think that if you sell a computer to the government and you know the government is responsible for planning these sorts of attacks with computers, then you bear some responsibility for those attacks.
You're an enabler.
All right, we're going to talk about cryptocurrency after this and why I disagree.
Welcome back. This is The Call to Freedom here on LRN.FM. And we've been talking about various things. Chris disagrees with me on the culpability of someone who voluntarily pays taxes or who voluntarily transacts business with the government, rather, that they bear some responsibility for the ultimate outcome of that. And it reminds me of a Muslim story that Will used to like saying, which is that while growing grapes isn't inherently wrong, if you sell those grapes to someone who you know is going to use them to make wine, then you bear responsibility for all of the drunk acts of aggression and immorality that occur while people are drunk off that wine.
Oof, yeah, I don't think I would agree with that. And
it's certainly a philosophical position.
One of the examples, we can kind of change this up a knot with an example within the cryptocurrency space. So if there's people who have been charged with basically that drug.
Keep going.
Well, they've come out saying that, well, they bought, okay, so what happened was it was something along the lines of somebody was selling cryptocurrency to a undercover agent of the government. And they did this numerous times. Eventually they come out and they say, I'm like a heroin and cocaine dealer or something like that. And at that point, the question is if you continue to sell them cryptocurrency, are you then guilty of assisting them with their drug dealing? I think it's ridiculous to say that you are.
I would say that. Muting myself. Awesome. I would say that you are. Not to, and I'm not arguing that we need to get the government involved in this or prosecute people for it or anything like that.
Okay, so you would say it's a moral.
I would say
it's a moral issue, and
I would say that the person who is facilitating that or who is enabling
I don't think it's really facilitating.
That's why I changed it to enabling.
I don't even know that it's enabling. It's certainly.
I think it's probably textbook enabling.
I don't know. I think it's a stretch.
But whether we agree or disagree on what the terminology is, I think it's a matter for the individual to sort out for themselves and ask themselves, why am I doing this thing that I know is ultimately destructive to other people? I think that it can be solved with internal reflection and resolution rather than external force.
We don't need a state to solve this problem.
I think
we do not need a state, but I have been called a state.
I think we definitely have. I don't think the government should be involved in morals or pass laws based on people's morals, and it's kind of like.
Well, I don't think the government should exist.
Yeah. I mean, look, all right, to
one
the extent,
step at a time.
Let's back up a moment and say, to the extent that the government exists, I don't think it should be involved in regulating, people's morals. Essentially,
what about laws against murder?
So, certainly, I would say that is something that could be within reason of criminalizing. I think if we're going to accept,
but that's still legislating morality.
I don't think it's so. There's a difference between regulating morals and legislate morality, and basically passing a law based on the fact that it causes injury to another person without consent. But it's your moral decision that it's wrong to cause injury to another person without their consent. That's a moral position. Yeah, and I probably wouldn't disagree with you, and I guess that's the line that I would draw.
I mean, that's what morality is, to say murder is wrong for whatever reason.
Okay, let's back up a moment. So I probably should add. Generally speaking, I don't think the government should regulate based on morals. I think it should regulate based off of this one principle of injury. So the concept of
but that's morals.
Unless it causes injury.
But that is subsumed by a moral position. You're against the injury of others for moral reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very specific line here, but yeah, I guess in some respects.
So you're fine with the government legislating morality as long as it's your morality.
Within the context, yeah. I mean,
all right, let's own it. Yeah.
So generally speaking, I would say that within they shouldn't be regulating morality. Okay. Outside of a specific circumstance where there's an injured party.
Like the non-aggression principle.
Yes. Well, it's exactly what I'm talking about. The non-aggression principle.
I still don't agree. I certainly don't want the government legislating morality.
So are you saying that the government should not
she's saying the government should not exist.
Should the government not criminalize murder? Is that your position?
That is my position.
Interesting.
The government should not criminalize murder.
Interesting.
What should it do?
Okay,
it should stop existing.
Let's define murder.
It should not criminalize anything.
Are we talking about where the person who is being murdered does not consent?
Yes. Sure. Why not?
And would it make any difference if they do consent?
No, the government shouldn't criminalize it in either direction.
Case. Interesting.
Well, we're joined now by by Liberty Phoenix, who wants to call me a statist. Liberty Phoenix, what's on your mind?
Oh, my God. Aria, I knew there was something that rubbed me wrong about you, and it wasn't your peen.
What was
I love
it then?
You, but damn it, you're a collectivist.
How so?
Individuals are only and explicitly responsible for their own actions. If I give someone else a gun and they go shoot someone else, that's not my responsibility. That's theirs.
I'm not saying that.
Hey, for the actions of other people.
First of all, calm down. Okay.
I.
Second of all, that was not what I said. I said if you give a gun to someone knowing that they're going to use it to shoot someone else, yes, you bear responsibility for that. That's not collectivism.
No, you are not.
That's demanding. No, that's demanding you take responsibility for providing the weapon that was used in this act, for knowingly providing the weapon. That's not collectivism. That's demanding the individual take responsibility for the circumstances they create.
Give them a bunch of pills, and I know that they're going to take their own life. Specifically, take their own life.
I have no issue if they're going to take their own life.
For one, they own their body. They can do whatever they want with it. That's not my place to dictate to them whether they can or cannot kill themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
And it does not make me morally responsible for what they do with whatever I provide them, especially if it's my business.
I would provide a gun to someone if they were going to use it to attempt to kill themselves. Yes, I would, because I don't have a moral position on suicide. I think it's the individual's choice to make. If they want to kill themselves, they can go right ahead.
Well, it sounds like you do have a moral position on suicide. You just aren't against it.
Sure. I think amorality would be a more appropriate descriptor for it.
Okay.
But I am against committing violence against other people.
Without their consent, right?
Yes, well, obviously. So if somebody wants to use that same gun, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. If someone was going to use that same gun to shoot someone else without that person's consent, I would not give them that gun, because I would feel that I would bear responsibility for that person being shot, because I was literally the person who gave them the gun that allowed it to happen.
You wouldn't give a gun to Michael Krombopoulos.
Someone a gun who is going to murder someone else and violate their property rights. I would not knowingly do it, but if I did, that does not make me responsible for the other person's actions.
Yeah, I would agree with that general statement, I think.
But what about your responsibility for your actions? That's my point.
But he didn't kill anybody. That's the thing. He's not the one dying.
Oh, well, he didn't kill anybody. He only sold them the gun and the bullets knowing that they were going to go and kill anybody. That's like totes for real, totally different. It's exactly the same. You might as well be pulling the trigger yourself.
You're not. You might as well is a half measure that is like, well, you might as well be doing this. Or we might, since we're all paying taxes, we might as well be the ones that are bombing children in Yemen.
Exactly. That's why people need to stop paying taxes, because you might as well be the one pushing the button to drop those bombs on the children in Yemen.
I think there's a distinction we need to make: culpability versus morality. Maybe it's immoral to provide the gun knowing that they're going to kill somebody, but it's not. They should not be held culpable for it.
Well, I don't want any of this to happen within any sort of state framework or any sort of aggression.
I don't think I'm not going to. I wouldn't necessarily try to enable somebody to do something that was wrong, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know that I don't even know if it is really enabling in most cases.
Well, this is the Call to Freedom. We're going to be back with more of this discussion, because everybody but me is wrong today, and we'll explain why. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and maybe you like the show and listen to it regularly and have been wondering how you can help and show your support. Well, social media shares, which we haven't even been doing apparently for the last month, but we've now fixed most of that. They certainly go a long way, but so does cash. And you can do that with Patreon at patreon.com/call-to-freedom. Our wonderful sponsors there are currently helping to keep the show up and running, including the podcast at calltofreedomlive.podbean.com. And we can't thank them enough for showing their support. Once more, that's patreon.com/call-to-freedom if you would like to check it out. Now, I've been accused today of being a collectivist,
which is ridiculous.
It is, because my contention, as we discussed during the break, is not... I was incorrect to say that you might as well have pulled the trigger yourself. That's true. That is a slippery slope down which I don't actually intend to go, because I don't actually believe that to be the case. However, I do believe that an individual has responsibility for events that they make possible. And whether or not someone is against the happening of a particular event is what determines how they should, handle it. But if I were to make it possible for the government to drop bombs in the Middle East by voluntarily paying taxes, I would bear some responsibility for those bombs being dropped because I was the one who made it possible. And it may even be true that somebody else would have come along and paid them anyway. That may be, but I didn't have to do it. This is about individual responsibility. This is about one holding the self accountable more than anything else.
Right. They might still drop the bombs, but you're not involved anymore.
I don't necessarily think that somebody should participate in should join the army, for example, because they know they're going to get directly involved in murdering people, right? But at the same time,
well, what about the ones who just fix the computers for the army?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that that's something I think is dirty, but I think there's a line, and you got to draw the line somewhere.
There's certainly a line, and I'm not saying we need to get the states involved. I want to be absolutely clear on that, and I'm not saying that society needs to come together and condemn this person or anything like that. Again, I'm talking individual responsibility. I'm saying a person should hold themselves accountable. It doesn't matter whether or not other people hold them accountable. Not to me, not in my worldview. It matters if an individual holds themselves accountable. And that's what I'm talking about here. And that the person who sells a gun, knowing that somebody is going to use it to go and shoot another person, should hold themselves responsible for making that event happen. Not that they should be arrested and charged with criminal conspiracy to commit murder.
I have a hard time putting the blame on another individual that didn't do the murder.
I'm not putting the blame on them. I'm asking them to accept their responsibility for what they did. They can, if I were to put the blame on them.
Certainly, this is a moral prerogative, I think.
Certainly, for the individual to take up themselves whether or not they believe the act to be wrong. Like when we were talking about cryptocurrency being used to give kids heroin ultimately through some chain of deals or whatever, I'm not strictly speaking against little kids doing heroin. I'm not sure that's how I wanted to phrase that.
I would probably agree with you on that one, but at the same time, I am not necessarily encouraging little kids to do heroin.
Yeah, but strictly speaking,
just to make that clear,
I'm not going to make a moral judgment. I don't think that's a matter of morality. I'm going to put it that way. So I wouldn't necessarily hold myself accountable because I don't think there's any wrongdoing in that particular circumstance. So it wouldn't matter that I made it possible ultimately through some chain of deals for these kids to do heroin, because I don't think that's necessarily immoral in the first place. Versus selling a gun or just giving a gun or loaning a gun or whatever to someone who I knew was going to use it to commit murder, I would hold myself responsible for that because I do oppose murder and find it to be immoral. That's my general position.
Okay.
Is that the individual should ultimately be responsible for what they do. Liberty Phoenix, are you still with us? Did you catch all of that?
I am, and I did.
So what are your thoughts?
And I agree. I absolutely agree with the statement that an individual should be responsible for what they do. Uh-huh. Now, that does not mean that the individual that sold a gun to someone else is responsible for what someone else does, because that would mean that every single arms dealer in the entire world, all your local gun dealers, are responsible for if somebody shoots someone. That means that they're responsible for providing them with the gun.
So that's why I have repeatedly said knowingly within the context of this conversation.
Does it change it for you if they knowingly they sold it to somebody who they knew was going to kill somebody else, or does it not change it for you?
For me or for Phoenix?
For Phoenix.
Say again? I'm sorry.
Does it make a difference to you whether or not the gun dealer knew the person that they sold the gun to was going to commit murder or not?
As a gun dealer, I would assume that every single person I sell a gun to is going to shoot someone with that gun. That's what they're for.
Okay, let's add to this.
Let's
murder. So we're talking about murder. Murdering somebody outside of self-defense is probably a better way to just explain that.
I would not hold them responsible for that. No.
You hold on.
I would not voluntarily do it, but I also would not hold another individual responsible for it.
Okay, so there's a difference between culpability and morality. So you would say it's immoral to do, but it wouldn't necessarily, you don't think they should be held responsible for it.
How can you judge them as immoral if you don't find them to be responsible for it?
Everybody has their own everybody has their own standards of morality, so we have to define morality. But it's a very subjective concept.
What act are you attributing to them that you find to be immoral? Because you've already said that you don't think they're responsible for anything that happens as a result of it. So what act have they done that causes you to go, no, that's immoral? Was it by chance selling a gun to someone who they knew was going to use it to commit murder?
Okay, yes.
Okay, excellent. We convinced someone today.
I agree. It's a question of morality versus culpability. My own personal morals, which are subjective and changed for every person, would say, no, it's not okay for me to give my gun to Joe Blow down the street because he's going to go kill his buddy because his buddy slept with his girl. It's not okay for me.
That's exactly the point I made. Because I find it to be immoral to commit an act like that. I would not
help someone else do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether or not somebody else would do it, that's for them to decide and to hold themselves accountable.
I think saying it's helping the other person is a bit of a stretch, but
how is it not helping them? You are literally giving them the weapon that they use to murder someone.
You're not actually helping them with the murder. I mean, look, if you had your hand on the trigger along with the other person, or you were holding them up while they were like pulling the trigger, and they would be able to pull the trigger without you holding them up, then you were assisting with the murder. But otherwise, you're not assisting with the murder.
Chris, chill out. They need a gun to shoot someone.
Yeah.
You gave them that gun.
Sure.
You assisted that in happening.
You gave them that gun knowing they were going to kill someone.
I don't necessarily think I would agree with that statement.
I don't know how you could conceivably disagree.
Because you're not actually helping with the part that's murder. You're giving them a gun which can be used to do some murder, but we're
giving them the murder weapon.
We're operating under the assumption here that we know what the outcome is going to be. And that's obviously fallacious itself.
Knowing something is not the same thing as helping with something.
No, I would agree. Knowing that somebody is going to commit murder is very different from helping them do it by providing them with the murder weapon.
Look, I'm not saying you should, provide them with the murder weapon. I'm not saying that at all. But I don't necessarily think I would call that helping somebody with the murder.
I think it is almost literally a textbook.
You helped them acquire a gun, maybe, but you didn't help them with the murder.
Yes, but you knew how the gun was going to be used. You knew it was going to be used in a murder.
But just knowing that something bad is going to happen should not make you culpable or in that sense at least.
So, Chris, would you sell the gun?
No. If the person told me they're going to murder somebody and the person who was being murdered we did not have the consent of that person, then I wouldn't probably participate in that type of situation.
What if someone else did?
Even if it wasn't a crime. Even if it wasn't a crime.
We're eliminating the state from the question entirely. But what about one of your friends? If your friends knowingly sold a gun to someone or gave a gun to someone who knew it was going to be used as a murder.
Yeah.
Because you said you wouldn't yourself do it.
Right.
Would your friend be immoral for having done that? Why wouldn't you do it, would be my question.
I don't know.
On what grounds would you refuse to provide this customer with the service that they are requesting?
I don't necessarily know if I would say they're morally culpable, because again, they didn't actually assist with the murder. They only provided the tool that was used in the murder, and that's not the same thing.
But my question was, why wouldn't you do it?
Assuming it's going to make a difference, whether or not I sold them the gun. I mean, I think if it wasn't going to make any difference, and I knew it wasn't going to make any difference, I think that's one circumstance that is, maybe. I mean, I probably still would sell them the gun, but I don't know. It's just, I think we're stitching together things that are just like so.
But you admitted that you would not personally do it,
right?
I assume there's a reason for that. Well, this has been the Call to Freedom. Unfortunately, we won't have the time to get into that. Hey, stay tuned. Free Talk Live is coming up. And don't forget, 10 o'clock tonight, it's Aria Uncensored, joined by Derek J. Freeman. It's going to be awesome. Stay tuned.